you guys for being with us today. I'm excited for this topic. We're talking about what the data you don't have costs you. And I've got 3 guys up here who are using data in their day-to-day operations and can speak to that intelligently and kind of help carry this interesting conversation that we want to have. So quickly introduce myself. My name is Geoff Dice. I'm a product manager at Dealerware. And so just like you all in the audience, I'm really interested in what they have to say to help inform where we go and what we're doing with our roadmap as it pertains to data at Dealerware. So quick round of introductions. So with me here, we've got Ron Bramlett from Sonic. Awesome, boss. Yep. Joey McGary with Audi North Atlanta. And Leo McFall, Western region with Audi. Thank you guys all for being here so much. And what I think is particularly interesting and kind of fun about this topic in this panel is that we have 3 different perspectives here. So we're bringing the OEM, the dealer group, and the dealership, and talking about data as it pertains to all of you and how you relate to each other with that data. So to kick us off here, let's just maybe start with a kind of a softball question for you, and a pun if you'll forgive the dad joke here, but what data point drives you today? Maybe Leo, if you don't mind, kick us off.
Oh, data point. On the OEM, I'm very obsessed with data, specifically, vehicle data and also customer experience data. That's how we drive our business. On the vehicle data, there's many different data points that we have to be able to understand what is the customer's needs and what we need to do to satisfy those needs. Just to kind of provide you with an example, we currently have about 2 million vehicles in our car park. Okay, so from that, and we probably our dealers service approximately, let's say 60% of that car park, so at least 40% of opportunities. So with that data, we need to kind of understand what are the opportunities for bringing those customers into our stores, and some of that time is looking at what is the capacity requirements. In many cases, that seems to be the restrictions of bringing additional business in. So using platforms, for example, as Dealerware as an example, that provides us with a pool of loaner vehicles that we can bring customers in and they can leave with a loaner. So those are the key aspects of it. We're looking to give a frictionless customer experience with our clients when they come into the stores, and time. We talked about time this morning. Time is very, very critical to our customer base.
Yeah, interesting. A lot of customer service, time. How do we service them properly and make sure we're running efficiently from that perspective? Ron, I'm going to kick it over to you for the dealer group perspective as we continue.
Okay, as Geoff mentioned, I represent Sonic Automotive. My job, for those of you who weren't here yesterday on the other panel, is to manage all the money we spent with a service loaner fleet. So that includes all the loaners that we operate. That also includes every dollar we spend transporting a guest to and from our dealership. So you're talking about Uber, you're talking about any type of ride share, shuttle service, or anything like that. When you're going back to loaner fleet, I'm talking about write-down expense, floor plan expense, taxes, insurance, all that stuff. It's about 20 different metrics, so it's plenty of data. I've got huge, crazy spreadsheets that I have to look at every month and trying to figure out what I need to manipulate or move around to ensure that we come in below our expense target. So there's a lot of data, I guess, that has to move me every month, and it's going to change depending on the environment and whatever our strategy is, and different changes in loaner programs, whatever's happening in the market, it changes day to day. So it's a lot, but enjoying it.
Maybe hard to pick just one data point there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if I summed it up for you, maybe something around the financials.
Yes.
On the dollar side.
I would say it's probably the one on the very bottom.
There you go.
That totals.
That bottom line's going to drive you. That's great.
Absolutely.
All right, Joey, what do you think?
So I think it's important to look at data not in today's world, but pre-COVID, and then obviously moving forward in the future when things return to normal. So for me, a big thing is ROI. What we get out of each loaner car. Yesterday in one of the panel discussions, there was a talk about really looking at what the loaner, what you earn over the period of its life cycle, and really understanding that ROI and being able to utilize it, knowing when to pull it, when to keep it in longer. is very important. And also, your fleet performance matrix, and then ultimately cost recovery would be the big 3 data points.
There we go. And you kind of mentioned here, like when things return to normal, it's a perfect segue to our next question here, which is, the pandemic. There's been a lot of discussion about this through the past couple of days of the conference, but as it pertains to data and how you guys operate, how has the pandemic affected what you do with data? And maybe how are you bridging the gap? How are you getting by in the current state of things with data? And I'm gonna let you kind of continue here, Joey, just because you touched on it.
Well, I think pre-pandemic, or we would leverage utilization basically to determine when to pull a car from the fleet, when to put new cars into the fleet. But in today's world, we don't really have that luxury because there is no cars. So right now, we're really focusing on monitoring the length of loan, how long the car's in the fleet, how quickly we can get the car back from the customer, to be able to try to reduce the third-party rental and the ride shares that are extremely costly. So that's kind of where we're at today. We're really just focusing on that length of loan and really just trying to make sure those cars are coming back as fast as possible and they're getting turned back over.
Absolutely. Yeah, manage the fleet as efficiently as possible, given the nature of things. Ron, how about you?
I'd like to second everything he just said. And when I look at my role with our company over the last 2 years, how much it's changed ever since, I guess, the pandemic began. The middle 2 weeks of every month that was the time I would spend traveling to all our dealerships and kind of monitoring process and making sure we have buy-in with everything we're doing. And once travel got restricted, I didn't have that visibility. And one of the things that we were really pushing back in, I guess it was 2019, was trying to get our associates to help recover a lot of the fuel expense and the total expenses. We've got 74 different fleets, from BMW all the way down to Volkswagen. I don't know how many markets we had that have tolls, but everyone uses fuel. And when you look at the expense, you see that creeping up. We're trying to get a hold on that, and we started getting some traction visiting stores that were struggling with that. And once we shut that down, you didn't really have as much visibility to it. You couldn't really see. So it's almost like you're a pilot and you're flying a plane and you can't really see where you're going. It's dark or it's stormy. But now you've got to rely on instruments. And whatever your dashboard's telling you, you've got to rely on that to see what's the data telling me and how can I move on that. And so I think about it from, I guess, a football perspective. We couldn't throw the ball to score. Now we've got to switch to running the ball to see if we can get in the end zone that way to get reach the goals that we want. So.
Yeah, interesting analogy, and I liked your airplane one. I feel like we could all relate to flying a plane with no sight during the pandemic, whether it was data or not. Leo, how about you guys and kind of how the pandemic impacts?
When that pandemic hit, from the OEM side, all our business partners, all our dealers in the networks was just going through the challenges. You had revolving door with people being sick, being able to take care of the particular customers. We had customers that was concerned with, COVID and activities within their, are their cars clean enough to bring into the stores? So, that was probably the biggest disruptor that we saw was staffing. Staffing was the biggest challenge, bringing people up to speed, but they seemed to figure out to navigate it. As we were going through that. And then, of course, after the pandemic took place, then we had the supply disruptions. And the supply disruptions was probably a major factor than anything else, because what we were finding out is that if you happen to deal with a lot of chips and computers, that type of repair, when you needed a particular chip or a computer, that vehicle could be down, sometimes a month or maybe 2 months. And when a customer comes in, of course, they're looking for a loaner fleet. So they have a loaner car, and it then prevents the dealer from, being able to loan that vehicle out to the regular customers coming through. I think probably more importantly, what we saw during this time was that the innovation, that took place at the retail centers, pickup and delivery, mobile service, all these type of activities were taking place. Because Uber was not that easy to bring customers in and out. They didn't feel comfortable. So it was all about providing that customer with this seamless transaction. So we saw that our dealer partners really jumped up, took care of the customers, and we'll continue to work through this. I think we're still working through the supply disruptions, but did a phenomenal job. Had a great year last year.
Yeah, and Joe, if you don't mind, I'm gonna pick on you just again here. We're looking at all these different perspectives here, the OEM, the dealer group, the dealership, and I think from the OEM and the dealer group perspective, there's, kind of here's how we'd like to see it go. But you're right there on the front line, and what these guys are talking about, how does that relate to what you see and what you're dealing with there at the dealership?
So obviously we have had to be very innovative over the last 2 years. Everything from ride shares to pickup and delivery, but really being able to take that data and give it back to the OEM and say, hey, listen, this is where now our expenses have really risen in areas we've never had to deal with before. Yes, we may have come down in loaner car expense, but that third-party rental and ride share is much greater than the loaner car expense. And instead of subsidizing the loaner car expense to help us subsidize some of that ride share and third-party rental, and they have. As a result of it, giving back that data, we now have subsidies in both that and mobility services as well, which really helps the dealer out. So I think it's being able to, again, show them that data and then they respond in a favorable way to help the dealer.
That's great. So segue into our third question here. This one is more about kind of future thinking and what's the data that you don't have today? So, looking forward, what's something you'd like to see, and maybe what are you doing today without that data too? Maybe Joe, if you don't mind, kick us off on this one.
So I think one of the biggest is ROI on individual ROs. When you're looking at sending out a loaner car out into the with a customer and then realizing what exactly is that loaner car earning me. When I can compare it to an RO and really understand that, I'll be able to really utilize the fleet much more effectively. And also looking at fleet valuation tools and predictive analytics, as well as my favorite probably is data triggered notifications. So right now I spend a lot of time, I have to go and research anything that I really want to be able to do, and I don't have a lot of time to do that. So if it's looking at a customer who's been in a car too long after the vehicle's been ready for pickup, I have really no way to be notified of that. I have to actually go in there and look for it. Oh, this RO was invoiced on this day, the customer was contacted, it's been 48 hours, the customer hasn't picked up. But having trigger notifications that are pushed to whoever's managing the fleet so that we can actively call those customers and get them back in quicker would be huge. So I think that's probably my number one thing that I would love to see is those notifications.
Yeah, that's great. As a product manager at Dealerware, this is where I'm excited about this conversation too. I get to hear about where the direction, where the value is. Ron, what do you think?
Well, what Joey just mentioned about ROI on a particular loaner, I feel like getting that data would be an absolute game changer for us, just because right now we kind of look at the expense as a total with all those metrics I named earlier. I'm going to take the number of loaners that we have in the fleet, and I'm just going to do simple math and figure out how much money do I think this unit's generating for me. And it give you a kind of a round number, but it's not truly accurate. I've got a 7 Series in Beverly Hills that we put 1,500 miles on in the past month. How much money did it really make me? I don't know. I'm not able to see that. And I don't know if Kyle's in here. Kyle was up here yesterday with Holman. He just left. They've got an interesting dashboard that I guess you guys all built that kind of show us the return on each unit. And that's something that we look forward to seeing in the future. And also the last panel with Eldrick and Lisa, how are these cars performing once they're being bought directly from the fleet? We've sold so many cars directly from the fleet, I'd say in 2019, 2020, 2021, before we started getting these program restrictions. I could never really see how much money that unit produced, and I had to go through, I don't know how many spreadsheets to figure out, okay, this is how long we had, and this is what we earned on it, this is how much I wrote it down. If I could just see that all in one place, right? All in one place where I don't have to hunt for it, that would make a huge impact. And that's just something I discovered or really thought about a few minutes ago. That's why, because you're just used to pulling the data your own way, and then you kind of get in this routine of, okay, let me get this report, I get this report over here, let me look at that, and then we're talking about that a few minutes ago, and I'm like, yeah, that would be an insane game changer if I could just see that, boom, pull it up on the screen, bam, this car produced this much money for me, right? This is what we sold it for, this is the gross it produced, this is how much I wrote it down. And I can see that, and I don't have to look for it. And then when we're doing, adjusting our strategy, I can give Tim, all our executives, this is what we need to do, and here's why. And I've got that data. So I'm looking forward to that whenever you guys can help get that to us. So.
You say the word game changer. You got my attention. Leo, let's pass it to you.
For us, vehicle telematics, that data that we get, I think in our 2017 Q7, there was about 2,000 data points that were pulling out of the vehicle. And of course, it tells you, some of the things that we would expect to get, like mileage, wear and tear items, tires, that type of information. So, that stuff is coming out, and we continue to provide, we get more and more data that's coming out from it. But I think from what we really need is more the predictability. Okay, for example, right now, even the data that we have, when I go out and communicate to customers, put marketing offers to customers, it's really, we need to customize those particular offers to what that need is for that vehicle at that particular time. So that's extremely helpful. Also, with the predictability, if, for example, we know that, brakes are going to go so long, but if we could get to a point that we know when the brakes are going to fail, before they fail, we could, maybe proactively go after the customer to bring it in at that particular time. So more of that predictability, not only with brakes, but all different items. So I think that is what we're looking for in moving that forward.
Yeah, and Leo, when we talked earlier, you had an interesting story about how that impacted you personally and how telematics might come into play. I'd love to have you share that with the group.
Last month I had to go to Detroit to a business meeting. Of course, I was on a flight from California to Detroit, and on that flight, of course, it was delayed for probably a half hour or so, but I had a 6 o'clock dinner meeting I needed to attend to once I landed in Detroit. So, being half hour late already, I had about maybe 40 minutes to get to Auburn Hills, which I think it's about almost that amount of time to get there. I go to the National Rental Car, rented an automobile. So, and I think, got out, picked out my car, went through the gate. Everything was very, transparent and very simple. So it was a very, easy, transparent, frictionless experience. However, shortly I got on the interstate, and all of a sudden I was hearing kind of a loud noise, on the road, and I'm saying it happened to be a Ford Bronco, and I thought, well, it's winter time, so maybe they have metal studs in the tires. I think it just seems to be noisy, and of course I'm more concerned I need to get to this dinner meeting that I'm headed to, and I glanced down at the dashboard and I see. It said 40 pounds of pressure in 3 of the tires, and it had 10 pounds of pressure in the last tire. And I'm saying, oh my gosh, how am I going to the meeting? So what I had to do is, I turned around, went back and exchanged a car. But wouldn't it have been nice, if the rental agency had that predictability to say, you got a low tire, fix the tire before the customer picks up the automobile.
Great example, personal experience of how the customer experience could be impacted directly with something like this.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. So one other question I want to talk about here, just because I mentioned the different perspectives you all bring to this, is just about how you communicate with each other with data because of your relationships with one another. So maybe I'll just pass it to the group. Anybody have any thoughts there or want to share thoughts on how you do communicate with data amongst each other?
I guess I could probably start. We're very, very into, service share, service market share. We talked about electric vehicles coming to the marketplace, and of course Audi is, very in that we continue the transformation into electrification and digitalization, so that's very, very paramount for us. But to that end, getting repair order data. We could be very specific, get that particular repair order data. So when you're starting to try to drive market share, to work with the stores to be able to understand what specific information they can get from us, it's available in a dashboard. We call it After Sales IQ, a service loyalty bonus portal. So they could go in, dive down into specifics. When was the last time the customer's in? When's the last time had a qualified visit? Take specific actions. You could look at if it had Audi Care, so you have a higher probability of bringing a customer in, or if you happen to have a campaign. and it allows them to have a tool that they go in even to their marketing department, their BDC, to make these phone calls to be able to continue to drive the business during the year. So it's one of the platforms that we have continued to push the data down to our retail partners so that they not only the data is operational, but what do you need to do to take action? So it's a good sized platform.
Joey or Ron?
Yeah, I think from a dealer perspective, and kind of going back to the topic earlier on the ROI per RO, but we're so trained to only have these cars in the fleet for so long, whether it be a year to avoid paying taxes or 6 months, because that's all the OEM is going to subsidize us for. But really is always the smart time to pull the cars. It's not always a smart time, but knowing where that car sits in the market and having that fleet valuation and knowing, hey, this car is going to be highly sought after. I could sell it today and make this much versus I can keep it in the fleet and make this much per RO. I mean, that's huge for the dealer to be able to make a really good business case to keep more of the loaner cars in the fleet for a longer period of time. So, again, just having that data and getting it from either Dealerware or from the OEM from a dealer perspective would just be just really big in order to really maximize the loaner fleet.
Yeah, any thoughts, Ron?
I will say from, I guess, a corporate expense management standpoint, we have reports that come out daily that kind of give us projections on where we're going to land. And sometimes you can see if there's a huge discrepancy in the expense. And if the store has the proper tools that I can go in and examine what's happening, I don't have to reach out to the GM. I don't have to find out what's happening. If they have Dealerware, I can just pull up the dashboard and see where the expense went, or if we have been recovering fuel or tolls. And that saves me a phone call that I have to make, or an email, or distract the GM that should be doing something more productive. So that's just, to answer your question, that's probably
As much as you can automate it and maybe put it into their hands.
Absolutely.
It takes it off of your plate, and you keep focusing on that bottom line number that you talked about.
Yeah.
That's great. All right. So with that, we do want to open it up for anybody that has questions. We'd encourage you guys to head over to the mic and feel free to shout it out. I think we've got really interesting perspectives and angles here to talk about data. So welcome anybody to hop over here and throw out any questions. Yeah, here we go.
Brandy's not here, so I'm not taking her chair. But at BMW, we do pay subsidy, and we also pay like sales incentives and stuff. So a reporting would be great. So my question is really, are the systems integrated where a dealer could see the subsidy, the more internal, rather than just like fuel or tolls? Because we want to see how much this 3 Series is making, but we need to bring that into the picture also, because obviously subsidy is where it comes.
Yeah, good call out. In terms of integrating the data and sharing between the layers.
Exactly, right.
We're working on some ways to do that. I know we shared one yesterday with you about kind of aggregating some of that data up, and Ron kind of alluded to it as well. So that's something that we're working towards with our product, Dealerware Insights, to take dealership level data and aggregate it up, and then even let you drill down. So if you wanted to be VIN level specific, I think kind of to your point here, you could still do that and get granular with the data, but from that higher level perspective.
All right, so something you're working on.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. And happy to
Thanks.
discuss further, and I'll call it out right now while you're here, but we have this email address on the screen. Please feel free to shoot us an email, data@dealerware.com. I'm on that one, as well as a couple of the other team members, and we're happy to continue conversations about that kind of concept as well.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for the question. You guys have any thoughts on that perspective on sharing the data like that? What you're doing today with it?
I don't know. To me, a lot of the data that I see from the Dealerware portal, it also helps us to kind of understand, especially when you're looking at service appointments, scheduling service appointments with it. Is there fleet availability? That seems to be our biggest challenge, because what we're seeing right now, especially with the supply shortages, is that the day's wait to a service appointment is being extended, 2 weeks. And we know the longer that extension happens, the lower the satisfaction of the customer. So that seems to be something, very, very, very challenging to us right now. So,
Yeah, good call out. Any other questions from the group? We're happy to field any others. I see some movement here. I'll give them a second.
Got a long walk this time. Each of you said that you have your own data point that drives you at the beginning of this. And I am not a data person or someone that is really in it, but I've gotten into my own. I have my own data points that drive me. So I wonder if each of you could share an experience about like how you work with your teams to encourage them to think a little bit more about measurement and optimization, because I know that in every organization there are people who just say like, oh, well, data is someone else's job, but we can all find ways to improve.
I'll actually start. I recently did that, and it was basically to make a business case to keep my loaner cars in my fleet and kind of stop the bleeding. So I took basically, and it would be impossible for me to do the entire fleet, but I just took 5 vehicles, and I looked at, and I went and pulled RO data for those 5 vehicles and determined what these vehicles are bringing me in revenue every month. And I presented that to my GM, and I said, so these are the costs that I'm going to incur if I keep the car in the fleet with continued depreciation and the taxes that I'll have to pay, but this is what I'm going to earn from this car. Well, when he saw that, it was immediate. He let me keep the cars in the fleet, and I extended everything for 6 months. And I'm basically going to be doing that moving forward. When any cars come up to be removed at that year mark, I'm going to build the case until we can get inventory levels back to normal to keep the cars. The other thing we were doing is, some of the cars were being brought into us with chip shortages don't have some of the driver assistance technologies that people will become accustomed to. So versus trying to sell those cars, which are going to be tough to sell, we're bringing those into the fleet. And then we'll keep those into the fleet until the updates come out that allow the technology to be installed, and then we'll pull them back out. So cars that I would typically not be getting, these inventory cars, are now coming into the fleet. So it's kind of what I've done with it.
Good point.
I'll share my opinion on that. In terms of, I guess, leadership taking ownership in data or using data properly, I believe that if you're a general manager and you're running a dealership and you are not adopting that mindset of collecting your data and knowing how to analyze it and coming up with a plan, you are going to get left behind just because your competition is going to do the same thing because they have the same opportunities to do so, right? So I'm not really a data person. I'm a used car guy to the bone. I came up in this car game as a used car guy. I'm paying attention to these panels yesterday. That panel that Mark had with Motork and with Kyle, I'm trying to grasp what they're talking about, right? I'm trying to pick it up because it's fascinating because I understand what they're trying to do, and what they're trying to do is get all the data into one spot so we can use it to make decisions. And when I look at our GM group, we've got an elite group of GMs, all different types of styles and personalities, right? But the thing that I've learned is they all have accepted data, and we're all using technology to try to improve and advance the company forward, right? Once we can get to a point where that data is right there in your face, you don't have to pull from here, and everywhere, right? Then my general manager doesn't have to spend time digging for reports, asking for things, right? My general manager can do the meaningful things, which is what? And if you're gonna ask me, it's motivating your team, training and developing the new leaders of our company, right? And pushing everyone forward. And if any of you have ever worked in a dealership, it's like a casino. You walk in and it's 6 a.m. and then you're walking out and it's 11 p.m. You're like, what happened, right? There's so many things that you have to do. And when you've got, like Melissa alluded to earlier, you've got a finite amount of time. And if I'm spending time trying to pull information, and then sit here like, okay, now what am I looking at? It's waste. It's time waste. It's over processing waste, and you're not doing like the real meaningful business to me. So again, I'm watching these guys yesterday, and I'm trying to extrapolate like, okay, they're talking about this, and this. But I see what they're doing, and I look forward to the future and seeing, man, what does this game look like 5-10 years from now? When all this is lined up, there's gonna be groups and teams out there dominating, getting market share, and then you're just gonna see everyone die off, and they're gonna start selling us just because they can't handle it and they're not gonna make it. So we've got a front row seat to the future of the car game, and it's good to be here. So I didn't mean to keep going like that, but
Great tangent. I like the casino reference as well. Any thoughts there, Leo?
Yeah, I mean, looking at data pieces, I know that we were looking at, how do we increase that or improve that customer experience? And one data source came through was technician video. Technician video was a tool out there, and when we went to look at that tool, what is it going to particularly deliver to us? But what we saw is that with the technician video, putting a technician, with the purpose of it is a walk around, kind of gives an understanding of what is needed for that vehicle. And what we saw from the customer point of view, it built a tremendous amount of trust, and it delivered the value. And in doing so, I guess the lift that we saw from it also, you saw increase of dollars per repair order, those that did the technician video versus without it. So again, it was multifaceted. We were able to improve our customer satisfactions, create a confidence within the customer. The trust was big value, and it delivered value to the customers. The customers were willing to spend more.
Great. I do want to make a call back to something Joey mentioned earlier. One of the members of our sales team, Ashton, has put together somewhat of a calculator tool that you could use to point to utilization and length of contract to help you gauge just how much revenue driving those numbers up, or in driving utilization up, excuse me, but length of contract down, how much revenue that helps to bring into the service department as well. Because as you have more availability in the fleet, you have more opportunity to come in and have somebody have their car serviced. And so that's another opportunity. If you want, email us. I can get you in contact with Ashton to share that tool, and I'll make sure, Joey, we touch base with you on that one as you continue to expand on offerings there.
I got one other quick point. Speaking of the Dealerware product with it, one thing that was always a kind of a roadblock when you did drop your car off, because it took a long time to get your vehicle, say a loaner vehicle, and if you had a rental, you had to go to a fleet rental agency to get the vehicle. But with the Dealerware platform, it's truly amazing how quick you can bring a customer in, and I think Alexis talked about it this morning. Time is so valuable to our customers, and to be able to get that transaction implemented, the vehicle ready, picked up and delivered, and even on the return process. So the time it saves a customer has been very monumental in improving that customer satisfaction.
That's great. If there's any other questions, feel free to jump out. I do want to call on our famous Melissa Terrell real quick.
So I'm just curious in general, has there been a situation where you've been presented data or used data that actually debunked a thought or hypothesis you had, right? I think we all assume a lot of things, and sometimes data has the power to break through assumption and prove us either right or wrong. So anything that's, interesting, exciting that's happened in your careers that you maybe thought one way and data pointed you in a different direction?
I'll share. I've been in used cars for 15 years. You have your own, I guess, personal opinions on certain model types. And when I began taking over loaners in 2019, I learned one of my favorite cars is probably one of the worst loaner cars that you can have, right? And it's a 5 Series. A 5 Series, I love 5 Series. We've had a couple in years past, and I've learned once you get those in the fleet, they just appreciate, I guess, more aggressively than your 3 Series, your X3s. And from there, I started really becoming hesitant to put those in the fleet, and because the 3 Series just performs so much better. 3 Series and X3s, if you have them, it's the best car, for us, for Sonic, to put in the fleet. And I've had to just use that data just to change the way I view those cars. And, my wife is asking, hey, can we get another one? I'm like, what about a 3 Series instead, And it just skews your thinking. And a lot of times in the car game, you've got baggage. You've got baggage and history looking at vehicles, and sometimes it takes the data just to kind of set you straight. Like, no, that's just your opinion. What does the information tell you? And so that's just, I guess, a personal example that came to my head right then.
I think piggybacking on that a little bit too is, for so long we've always thought, putting in these very low-cost vehicles into the loaner fleet is the way to go. You know, very stripped-down cars with no options. But when you go to try to retail those later, it becomes much harder. But instead, actually, the way we order cars at our dealership is we actually load them up. We build cars that are going to be really sought after while they're in the fleet, so that when they come out, they're going to sell way above market or at least at market, and you're going to make your money back on them. So I think that just understanding that it's not always the cheapest, it's the best in that scenario has really helped us out.
I mean, data itself, I mean, there was a, we saw a lot of great data, trying to penetrate the San Francisco Bay market, with market share, with price reductions, okay? What happens is we went out and did a complete pilot with regards to that, thinking that, if we just reduced, labor and parts, 15%, that we would get that growth. We spent a lot of time, a lot of money with doing that, and ultimately we did not see the lift that we expected. So that was something that was, you figured that would be a strong correlation. It would happen, but it did not happen.
Melissa with a zinger there. That was a great question, though. Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Lee, you got one?
Lee doesn't have his Lee doesn't have his fancy jacket on today, but harder to see him in the bright lights.
Yeah, just a silhouette of Lee right there.
Well, with that, I think we will wrap up for today. I do want to say thank you guys so much for joining us and for sharing your perspective. A lot of interesting conversation around data. For those in the audience, feel free to reach out to me at this email address or grab one of us in the halls. Happy to continue the conversation there. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks again.